This is how to get your deep squat better. So a deep squat, basically we're talking about barefoot, heels down and squatting right to the bottom of the movement. It isn't just a position we want to be able to get into, it's a position we want to feel comfortable enough in that we can move around once we're down there. So able to wiggle around side to side, move knees out to the side and move knees inwards from there. And these are just those basic things we want to have once we're down into deep squat. But if you're watching this, the chances are just getting into that position is your problem. And so what we want to do is look at some of the really simple things you can do that can help you start to be able to break those barriers to get into that position. Because it is a weirdly catchy movement where lots of people who are great at everything else just can't get this movement to flow. So what we want to look at is the possible things that are stopping you from being able to do it well. And essentially, we've got balance issues that can prevent deep squat. We've got mobility issues that can prevent deep squat. And we've got strength on the front of the body issues that can sometimes get in the way. So the first question you want to answer really is, do you have the actual range of motion in your hips, knees, and ankles to be able to do it? And this is an easy way to check. Is you find something you can hang on to, so a bar or a pole or doorway, and then essentially with some kind of fixation for your arms, does that make the difference? So if I'm holding on and I am then able to get right down into deep squat, we can eliminate range of motion as our problem. So if you can do this all of a sudden, you know you've got a balance or a strength issue that's stopping you feeling comfortable at the bottom of the deep squat. So let's first of all deal with the scenario where that doesn't fix it, right? So holding on doesn't make a great deal of difference, and then we really want to look at joint range of motion in those basic positions. So if you take the same basic position, and we're going to tuck our toes under so that that's as if our feet are flat on the floor. And then what we want to do is essentially walk the knees back as far as we can to give the bottom of the foot and the ankle a good stretch. And then we're going to see whether we've got full knee bend. Because if we don't have full knee bend in these unloaded positions, then that's what you've got to work on to get that deep squat better. And we can then look at getting the body down into this position. And what you'll see is this is essentially the exact same position as a deep squat, but I've turned off gravity. So it's a really great place to work on any tightness that you feel down either side, and that might be ankle and foot, it might be getting closure down through your knee joint, and it might be getting your chest onto your thigh for your hip bend. And we want to take that three-pronged approach to either side, checking the foot and the ankle, the knee for bend, and then the hip for ability to go down. And just spending time in this position, getting all those joints super comfortable being here, is time well spent if flexibility of those hips, knees, or ankles is part of the issue. If it seems to be all about the ankle, then this position here can be really, really useful. And with just a little bit of body weight going down through the ankle, it's going to express its best mobility. So what I can do is essentially in this kneeling position, work on being able to drag the knee from side to side while staying out knee over toe as far as I can. And I can even have my arm doing a little bit of work to really wriggle the looseness out of both the ankle and the arch of the foot. For a lot of people who feel like their ankle bend stops their squat, it's actually a lack of mobility within the foot that's contributing to that. So knee forward and knee side to side is a really great option for making the ankle joint work hard. And again, left, right, check, please. One tight joint could be all it is that's stopping you from doing this movement. So that kind of clears our ankles. if we are looking to make some more improvements to knee bend, and no matter how much we sit on our heels, it doesn't get much better, there is another subtle function of the knee that can be contributing to that. So if you're just tight to bend into the knee like this, often what's missing is the ability of the tibia to actually rotate inward towards the other leg as it comes into bend. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to sit, hook the back of your leg like this, bend your knee as far as is comfortable, and in that position, you're going to practice wiggling your big toe inwards whilst keeping some tension in the front of the ankle. We don't want this, okay? This is just a twist within the foot, and it won't help the knee bend very much. What we want is to keep that sole of the foot pretty flat to the angle you're looking at it, and then wriggle gently round the corner like this. I'll spin around so you can see it from some different angles, but we're basically bending the knee as far as comfortable, pulling the foot up to 90 degrees, and then pumping the big toe inward to try and create a local rotation within the tibia. And the more we can free that movement up, the easier it's going to be to get the knee bend to come fully into its end range position. So particularly knees that have any kind of surgery or kind of decent injury history, it is often tibial internal rotation that's stopping the knee being able to bend fully. So top tip to look for if your knee gap seems to be the place where you're struggling for that movement. And then lying on our back, we can just make sure that we really do have good, easy hip closure, because the thing with a hip is there should just be no real feeling as it comes to the end point. So it should just be your thigh running into your belly that is the end range of that position. And if that's tight and it doesn't happen, then you want to work on it. A really lovely way to work on it is to bend the other leg. That'll generally make it easier to get your knee to meet your chest. And then all I've got to do is hang on to that as I put the other leg back down again. So it sort of reverses the emphasis of the movement between the two legs. So I bend this knee, I pull the knee right up to the chest, I keep the knee to the chest, and then I just drop the other leg down into extension, hanging on for dear life here. I can make it pull and I can feel it a little bit. I've got to be able to lean into these restrictions. But what we don't want is to be nipping and feeling sharp pain on the front of the hip. That's worth just staying away from. But pulling and just working into the tightness is a really good idea. And a necessary evil of regaining range of motion if you have lost it. So just show that the other way around. If I struggle to get knee to chest, I bend the other leg up, and that makes it much easier to get that full contact between the thigh and the guts. And then from there, I just extend this leg back down. It might not go all the way, but I make the stretch come by pushing this knee down rather than just by hauling this leg up. So just some simple, easy ways to improve those ranges of motion. And if we get our range of motion working better through our legs, then hopefully we will start to be able to get down into this assisted position where we're holding on to something solid, we can get something close to the bottom of the deep squat. So we'll see something that'll work for some people, but now where you'll find yourself is way out the back, basically, where you can feel that if you let go for even just one moment, you're going to fall out the back of the movement. So, and that really brings us into the stuff around balance and strength. So one thing that's worth trying is anything that raises the heel. So these are made specifically for the job, but you can use a rolled up towel or a couple of books or magazines, anything you like really. And all we want to do is position them so that we've got a little bit of comfortable turnout in our feet and our heels are very slightly raised up. And by raising the heels up, a lot of people will find the ability to drop down to the bottom of the squat gets much easier. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's ankle range of motion. You don't need quite as much ankle range now, but it's also assisted both balance and strength just by pitching you forward. But the myth is that it's somehow cheating, and it's not at all. It's just allowed you to get to the bottom, because the big thing we've got to understand around a deep squat is that ultimately it is a restful position. It isn't stress of holding it. If you're stuck here, there's always work to kind of stay there. But if you can get right to the bottom, it's a bit like paddling out, where it kind of gets scarier and scarier and scarier. Then suddenly you break through the line and it's all right, and it's quiet and it's chilled. So we want that relaxed position, that feeling like we've made it out the back. And if stepping on a couple of blocks suddenly allows you to relax at the bottom, then you're going to be able to spend time in position and gradually engage with the movement, and that's going to be really, really useful. So if this fixes it, you think, brilliant, right, I can get on and I can go and do deep squat videos and work on all the range of motion stuff that goes alongside that. And all you've got to do is very gradually, over time, make your block support smaller and smaller, and you might never get there, but it still lets you be in deep squat and look around with those movements. So feet wedgies are a really good way to do it, to get to the bottom, to be able to relax, and then all you've got to do is just gradually pull them away over time. So heel wedgies are a really, really great way to do it, but it won't work for everything. Nothing will work for everyone when it comes to this stuff, because there's lots of different reasons we can find the bottom of deep squat difficult. So if this works, then we're strongly suspicious that somewhere on the front of your body there's a kind of weak link in your muscular strength, and that's the limiting factor. So I'm going to hold a relatively small weight, and it doesn't matter what it is. Again, this could be a rock on the beach or a med ball. I've just got a 4 kilogram dumbbell. Lighter is kind of harder in a way up to a point. So the maximum assistance you get is usually from about sort of 10-ish kilos, and then working down from there is the equivalent of lifting up heavier weights, if you catch my drift. So we are aiming to get to the point where we don't need any weight, but if we've got a weight, what we can do is essentially, as we lower ourselves down into position, I'm going to think about just sticking the weight out in front of me. So as I go down, the weight goes out, and for a lot of people that will just create a kind of counterbalance position where they can relax to the bottom of the movement. And again, that's good news. It means you're down there and you can start to engage with all the things we want at the bottom of a squat. And then if that has helped you, then essentially what we can think about is bringing the weight in closer is less assistance, and using a smaller weight would be a progression to make the exercise slightly harder. So big weights out here is a big assistant, small weights in here is a small assistance, and sometimes they are enough just to make the difference. So weight out in front is a top one to look at. So weight out the front can be a really fast and easy way to go from can't do a squat to can do a squat. But it's not very precise, right? It's essentially helping out all the muscles down the front of the body to make the movement a little bit easier. So we can sharpshoot a little bit more by using a standard, found in almost every gym and exercises facility, loop band. So you want one that's sort of medium to heavy resistance, too light and it won't feel like it's doing very much. And what this allows you to do is work out which muscles on the front of your body are most in need of a little strength boost. So the first place where we can find weakness that's preventing people being comfortable in deep squat is actually on the front of the leg. So the tibialis anterior muscle, this guy here, the primary puller up of the foot, once we're down there, that's got to hold the lower leg forward, and if that's not happening, then we're kind of constantly battling that backwards fall. So what I've got is a band under my foot, and then I'm going to loop it under the other foot, and essentially what I've got to do is pull this up and stick it over my knees as I drop down into my squat position. And it is a little bit awkward, and it does pull your knees together a little bit, but what it's doing is essentially assisting that tib band work. So if a band like this suddenly locks you forward, you know the place you need to make stronger is down on the front of the legs here. So, and band on the front, suddenly got a squat. What we want to work on is our tib band strength, which we get by doing ball of the foot raises leant against the wall. So an easy version is just going like this, but what we want to do is get the nuance and say, right, What we don't really want is lots of toe extension pulling up and in as we do it. So if we curl the toes down slightly and then pull it up, we know we're getting activation of that primary stabilizing muscle on the front of the ankle. So we want the big dog to do the work. And the way we do that is by curling the toes down a little, and then we can make it harder by shifting weight over to the side that we're going to move, and we can even put the other leg against the wall, and then in that position there's real challenge just to lift the foot up at all. So the toes are curled, majority of the weight goes onto the foot I'm working, and I look for a level of difficulty where just 5 or 10 good reps is enough to bring on a bit of fatigue and pump in these muscles here. So that's one really good way to make your tib ants work hard. And then the other way you can make this muscle work hard is with a backwards shuffle walk. So you're going to bend your knees as far forward as you can like this. You stand in this position, and then you've got to pick your foot up and move it backwards, trying to keep it as flat to the floor as you possibly can. So I'm trying not to let that happen as I step. I'm trying to step, keeping all that tension through the front of the ankles. And then I can just shuffle back through micro steps like this. And as I do that, I will quickly enough feel the burn coming on through that little important muscle on the front of the ankle. So loop band around the knees, makes your squat easier, equals your tib ants weak. They're two great ways to strengthen your tib ant muscles. So then the other way you can look at a band assisting the squat is to stick it behind your back and then over your knees. And again, a little bit awkward as we get down, but if this stops you falling over backwards, then you're looking at right in the guts of you as to where your weak. So abdominal and hip flexor muscles need to work hard to pull us forward through there. So if this one makes a big difference, the first thing is you just stick the band on and you use that as a way to get down into position. It's a small amount of assistance you're giving yourself. So sometimes just doing this and being here for a few sessions, and then you won't need the band again. But it does point us towards wanting to do some exercises to make our middle stronger. So the easy ways to do that, zombie sit-up is a fantastic way to make the whole front chain of the body work hard, and I can scale it really easily. So I'm lying down, legs are out flat, knees and feet slightly apart, and I've got to keep my legs pressed down into the floor the whole time. From there, I'm going to bring my hands up, look up, point out just above your feet, and sit up from there. Now, if you don't come up in that position, then you've definitely got weak gut muscles, and you're going to just repeat and practice. We can make this slightly easier. I could have a band that I pulled down into this position that could then just give me a tiny bit of assistance to get out. Most people will be able to do this though. So then we make it harder by just opening the shoulders. So the further back my hands come in space, and the harder the exercise becomes. So 90 degrees would be moderate, and right back overhead would be making it nice and hard. And I'm looking for that point where it is hard to keep my calves pressed down into the mat or the floor. And then hands can keep coming further back till we're right back overhead, and trying to get up in this position without using shoulders to help at all. Now, sometimes the weakness is much more on one side of the body than the other, so we can bias this exercise to left and right hand side by essentially bending one knee. The leg you bend up, you put at a mechanical disadvantage, so the other side of your front is then working much harder, and then we can go back through that sit-up movement and make sure that both sides of the body are equally as competent. And that's just a lovely abdominal frontline exercise. A lot better than a lot of standard sit-ups where our feet are anchored. They don't really give us an opportunity to work that hard through our abdominal muscles, whereas this type of sit-up really does make sure your guts are doing the work. And that is one of the muscles that might be weak. The other thing that can be weak when the band around your back helps is your hip flexor, and that's the muscle that really pulls your leg up underneath you. It's a knee to chest. So if I'm in a press up position I make my hip flexor work hard by keeping my back relatively straight and pulling my knee right up towards my elbow. And I want to be able to do that in the absence of a rounding back. So I've got to keep my back relatively flat and just bring knee right up to elbow. So easy is to go to the elbow on the same side. Hard is to move the leg to the elbow on the other side. And that does require a little bit of rotation of the spine, but I'm still trying to avoid a feeling of essentially flexing through my spine and crinkling my abdomen. I want to keep my tummy nice and long as I make this movement to ensure that it really is the front of the hip that's doing the work. So there are two nice options for isolating strength glitches around here that might be stopping the squat from working well. And then our final option to strengthen that front stuff, and always one of my favorites, and you'll get bored of hearing it in this program, but hanging really is one of the fastest ways to better physical health for surfers. Does so many good things for our shoulders, keeps the tendons, ligaments tough, keeps the rotator cuff strong, keeps the nerves healthy. So I'm going to get into my wide hanging position, and then from a wide hang I can look at various different exercises to make those front muscles work hard. But the easier versions would be knees to chest doubles, knees to chest singles, and I could add resistance band and little weights on feet if these are too easy. And then a really, really lovely one is knees to opposite elbow. And this is using both back and hips. So I don't mind what shape your back makes, but we don't want to bend the elbows. Keep the elbows straight, pull the knees as high as they can one way, and pull the knees as high as they can the other. And that's enough of that. Okay, so we look at the range of motion, and we look at the strength options that could be limiting the deep squat. And yet you still have some people that, no, Paul, I'm not there yet. Still can't do it, right? So the more your deep squat looks like this, the more likely it's a balance and integration issue rather than anything physical per se in terms of range of motion or strength. So tight squats will tend to stop like this. See the early interventions for joint range of motion. Weak squats will often have sessions I can get down, but I just fall out the back every time. But then the third group of dodgy deep squats are basically inability to keep the head up relative to the backside. And that very often is about our balance and integration. So a squat's a vertical movement. So what we're going to look for is a couple of vertical integration exercises. Sounds fancy, and it is, but it's not very difficult. What you're going to do is hold out one thumb just above eye level, and you're going to hold your other thumb just below eye level. And then I'm going to put my head on nice and straight, and I'm going to look at my top thumb, and then I'm going to find my bottom thumb with my eyes as fast as I can, and I'm literally going to pump my eyes from looking at one thumb to looking at the other thumb, trying hard to keep my head still and move as rapidly and as accurately as you're able to for 20 to 30 seconds, and then have a little rest. If that felt easy, you can move your hands a little bit further apart, but you want to very much be able to get your eyes right on the target, and you don't want to have to move your head to do so. 10 more pumps. If this is going to work, basically think work really hard for 10 to maybe 30 repetitions, and then immediately squat and see whether it's easier to keep your head and chest up after stimulating vertical eye movement. Weird, but it works really well for a lot of people. So another option that will work on the same basic system is to keep the eyeballs still and move the head around. So rather than moving the eyeballs in a static head, we're going to think about keeping the vision static, look at a target, and now I'm going to set up and smooth, wobbling, accurate nodding movement. Chest is still, thumb is still, head is moving quickly over a short distance, keeping the eyes reflexively on the target. The upper limit, how fast you shake your head, is the clarity of what you're seeing and the stillness of your upper back. So you go as quickly as you can, keeping vision stable and spine stable. And you do that for 20-30 seconds, and you see whether that is the one that suddenly helps your body make better sense of deep squat. Maybe. Okay, so that's a couple of little integration exercises that can really help your balance system work it better. So our final option of ways that we can create better kind of neural integration that might help with our deep squat is to stimulate the soles of our feet, because they've got a lot to do with balance, and this is quite a strange hack in a way that works for an awful lot of losses of range of motion. So if it doesn't help your deep squat, it might help your toe touch or your look behind. What we're going to do is give our feet a sensory party. Now, there are various different tools you can do with this. This is my personal favorite in our clinic. It's called a neuro board. It's amazing. It's a sort of laser cut piece of wood with a bunch of spikes on that you stand on to stimulate the bottom of your feet. And a really great, cheaper option and more widely available is just acupressure mats like this one that you can get on Amazon and various other online retailers. Sold to lie on, and they're great for that as well, but it also makes an excellent sensory surface to stand on and put your feet on. And if you've got rough, tough feet, none of these things will cause a problem to move and wiggle around on. So if you're super sensitive when you get on something like this, we're suspicious that your oversensitive feet might be compromising how much information they're able to give to the rest of your system about balance. But the simple way to tell is you stand on it and you see if that is the thing that suddenly makes your deep squat better, and it might be. And if it is, you just think, I've got to spend time on that thing doing various bits of foot and lower leg work to kind of knock out the oversensitivity of the bottom of the foot. It's a bandwidth issue, basically. If your feet are busy being sore and sensitive the whole time, they haven't got enough bandwidth left to actually tell your brain where your feet are on the floor. And with that uncertainty, dropping into that deep squat position just isn't a good idea. So we've got options for foot sensation. We've got options for vertical integration of eyes and inner ears. We've got front strength options, and then we've got mobility options. And I very much hope that all of you are squatting a little deeper than you were before. Some people get a miraculous fix where they do one thing and suddenly they're at the bottom, and other people be a much gradual process. And if it is a gradual process, that's fine. You go, right, well, all I actually needed was that first bit where I hung on and then it got right down. If that's the thing that gets you there, what I've got to do is just learn to survive for brief moments with less and less support. So if you're hanging on for dear life with two arms, I'm going to try and get to that point where it feels like my balance is roughly kept as I do it, and then I can move away, and then eventually away completely. And so just a kind of graded exposure and a persistent attitude of picking one or two helpful little tweaks and then trying to get to the bottom. Just a couple of myths that are worth correcting around deep squat. It doesn't matter where you put your feet. So if you prefer to have your feet turned out a little bit, that's absolutely fine. If you prefer to squat with your feet nice and narrow, that's absolutely fine. Our hip morphology, the shape of our hip joints, is quite different between different human beings, different genders, different ethnic groups. And so we'll all have different points that we want to put our feet when we squat. The simple fact is, wherever it feels like you should have your feet when you do a deep squat is absolutely fine. But what we want to think is, once we're down there, we don't want to be putting up with positions that require us to lift some of the sole of the foot away from the ground. So put your feet where you like on the ground, but try and work on squats where the whole of the sole is down on the ground. And then once you finally reach deep squat, whether it's aided or unaided, your first priorities are to be able to work on lean out. So I'm basically just leaning into one leg, looking to really over squeeze the ankle, knee and hip on that side. And then the same thing on the other side. And then I want to show I'm really comfortable at balance by being able to bounce up and down into this position. And then we can look for hip rotation. So with the arms out in front, I can use external rotation of the hip to flare the knee out to the side. I want to be able to do that, but keep the big toe down on the floor as I do so. So knees out. And then if I lift my arms up a little bit, I can work on knees in. And this is one a lot of people do struggle with, but we should be able to slide over to this side and then roll onto the inside of the foot here and let this leg drop right away into flexion. And if I can do that, then I should be able to do the same thing on the other side as well. And that's a really good check for that inward rotation of the hip, which is a super important movement to be maintaining if you want healthy hips that are going to last a lifetime. Look after deep squat, knee flares, and knees in, and you can't go far wrong. But once we've got squat working, we can then start to turn it into a much more dynamic movement. So if this is my deep squat position here, I can start to work on drills that involve squishing around and rotating the body around these deep squat patterns. So this just twist around. You basically think you pick this spot on the floor and you touch that same spot 4 times to complete a rotation. Same spot, 1, 2, 3 to make the transition. 4 count the first one. 1, 2, 3. And then you finish in this position where essentially you've got foot on the floor, other leg wrapped around. But it is such a lovely little flowing movement of the body that will make sitting in deep squat seem like a really, really boring double activity. So it's nice to just see where we might take those things once we've established that basic position. But all the healthy humans can do this relatively well. So if you struggle with it, then put it on your to-do list of things to make better.